2023, to call a public hearing regarding the establishment of Suffolk County wastewater management districts. Okay, the first speaker I have is Mark Romaine. And you have 3 minutes, and please just give me a name for the record. Thank you.
Good afternoon. We can agree that water is among the most vital resources for existence. Because of this, it's imperative that any plans that manage that resource must be well vetted, as errors can't afford to be made. The necessity of this meeting makes it clear that the approaches over the last several decades have brought us to this point of nitrogen contamination, eutrophication, and algal blooms. It would appear that different methods are called for. Long Island's natural systems have been studied by leading scientists for well over a century, by entities such as the U.S. Geological Survey, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, the New York City Water Board, the National Groundwater Association, Stony Brook's Marine Science Center, the American Geophysical Union, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, as other estimable organizations. A report by the United States Environmental Protection Agency titled "The Effects of Sewering on Long Island's Shellfishing Industry" provides significant insight. It mentions how the balance of fresh to salt water in the Great South Bay is vital to the fishery. It specifically states that outfall sewering poses a potential threat to this balance and therefore to the shellfishing industry. It references that the initial impetus to install sewers was the concern that the widespread use of cesspools and septic tanks could contaminate groundwater aquifers. However, it goes on to say that more recent data have shown that the problem of drinking water contamination was somewhat overestimated. It also discusses the necessity of recharge projects on such a scale that ultimately the outfalls for ocean disposal will be retained only as backup facilities. The United States Geological Survey conducted a study of 10 South Shore streams in areas of varying development. They determined large-scale increases in impermeable land surface area and construction of storm sewers convey runoff directly to stream channels and limit recharge. Also, that the construction of sanitary sewers and sewage treatment plants that discharge wastewater to coastal waters rather than returning it to the groundwater system cause groundwater levels to decline. The United States Army Corps of Engineers produced a study that found that prior to sewering, aquifer-fed freshwater flowed into the Great South Bay at a rate of 381 million gallons a day. They further stated that too great a lowering of the water table could cause salt water to replace fresh water. Nitrogen is naturally introduced into our environments through atmospheric deposition. This nitrogen grows plants as large as oaks and as small as algae. Studies have been produced that show that sand and gravel aquifers naturally denitrify those inputs. Overpumping an aquifer draws nitrogen deeper into it at too fast a rate. Runoff prevents nitrogen from interacting with soil bacteria and sends it directly to our waterways. A reduction in water table height reduces flow and creates stagnancy in our natural environments. Any plan adapted that neither limits runoff nor addresses recharge will fail to remediate and mitigate the effects of overdrawing our aquifers. Thank you.
Okay, so we have some questions. One legislative Carrick first.
I'm sorry, Mr. Romaine, if you didn't state it already. What are your credentials? What's your title?
Well, fortunately for me, I'm just basically a local historian and an environmentalist. What happens is that because of a lot of the activities I've been involved in, fly fishing, sailing, shredding clams in the Great South Bay, I've met quite a number of people that have a passion for water and water quality. Fortunately for me, once I became aware that there is a significant amount of studies that kind of fly in face of some of the science that we hear about today, I felt that it was important that even though many of these scientists may no longer be alive, their science still deserves a voice, specifically when we're talking about the natural environments of Long Island, the safety of our drinking water, and the sustainability of our natural environments.
Thank you.
Legislator Richburg.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer. Mr. Romaine, how are you?
Good, how are you?
So a couple of quick questions. So you stated a couple of things in your testimony here today. So you believe that we should have sewage treatment plants, but not send them into the ocean?
Yeah, the Environmental Protection Agency, in their report, the one that I had referenced, specifically said that ultimately, if Long Island is going to develop any sort of sewering, they need to, in concert, also establish groundwater recharge. Because ultimately, if you think about it, all of our natural environments evolved receiving 100% of recharge. So if our current plans reduce that recharge by 20%, that means every year we have a deficit, and that deficit only grows worse.
So, and when was this EPA?
This was done actually 1978 while the sewers were being built, because there was a great amount of concern as what could happen to our groundwater if we just built sewers and didn't build any attendant mitigation practices.
So the study's from 1978?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If I could just interject one point there. The good thing-
Hold on,
Oh,
sir.
okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So, studies from 1978, and you believe that that study is more current than some of the other algae bloom studies that we've had of recent, more,
I would believe it's actually more relevant because if you think about it, it measures an environment prior to sewering and gives you what the environmental balances and conditions were at that time. So if you consider it this way, particularly when we're talking about natural environments, the sand and gravel in our aquifer doesn't change. The rainfall that we receive every year doesn't change. What changes is how we treat that water that lands on our land and whether we get that into the ground to the aquifer as it naturally used to or we don't.
I mean, you could also look at the following studies from the EPA that show that rainfall has changed, the chemical composition of the rainfall has changed. You could also look at some of the studies that show that the different chemicals that we've used since 1978 has changed. So that would dispel what you just said because obviously water has changed.
Well, it wouldn't dispel. I'm talking about the volume of water. You're talking about what characteristics might have occurred to it between then and now. The issue is this. I have a friend of mine that's a retired professional engineer who managed wastewater. And he said, honestly, for me, I would rather have groundwater that's treatable than no water at all. And that's the direction that we're currently heading in.
So I guess then you're not against the sewering per se. You're against where the treatment water goes.
Right. In other words, as long as you were building, it's just like with anything. Once you start pumping water out of the ground to the great degree, you have to approach it in a way as how does it get back into the ground?
So you're not against a referendum because a referendum is the ability to build the sewage treatment plants that would be able to put the water either in the groundwater or offshore.
Well, that's the difference. I'm not for ones that put it offshore because that's actually what's created the problem and exacerbated the problem.
Right, but that would say that either way we should move forward with a referendum because...
Does the referendum address recharge and limiting runoff? Well, then no.
But that would be when we design the sewage treatment plants.
No, runoff is actually created every time you build a parking lot. 1 acre of parking lot on Long Island, 1 inch of rain on one parking lot, 1 acre of parking lot equals 27,000 gallons of water. Now, over the course of the year, with annual rainfall of 4 to 4 inches, that's over 1.2 million gallons of runoff that goes to our bays and other environments.
Right, but
so we're not just talking sewage treatment.
This is about properties in our residential areas and our downtown areas. This isn't about stormwater runoff.
Well,
I mean,
no.
I'm pretty sure we have other capital projects to work on stormwater runoff.
Where I'd disagree with you is that this is about our aquifer and the health of that aquifer. And you can't cut it off into little sections and say, well, this is our downtown or this is uptown or this is anywhere else. The aquifer itself needs to be properly managed and it needs to be maintained at minimum water table heights in order to affect the safety of our drinking water supply as well as the long-term sustainability of our natural environment.
So do you agree or disagree that we should sewer and put IA systems in and around Suffolk County?
I would tell you this, right now we've only sewered.
It's a yes or a no question.
I would disagree only because we've never built a mitigation.
So you are against sewering or in favor of sewering?
No, what I'm saying is that sewering would be an attainable goal if we managed it the way the EPA had originally recommended. The problem for now is that we've never replaced the groundwater that we've pulled out, which as a result has led to degradation of our natural environments and, as this very meeting shows, concerns about contaminants in our aquifer.
So you are against sewering and IA systems?
I think you're not understanding my answer. I'm disagreeing with them if we continue managing them the way we do now.
So you're disagreeing with the implementation program?
Without recharge and without limiting runoff, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Legislator Fleming.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Romaine.
Hi.
So am I correct that that you are not yourself a scientist, but you're here to speak on behalf of scientists who are no longer with us? Is that correct?
Some who are no longer with us, some who no longer live here, some who've retired to Florida.
Okay. Could you just give me the list? Who is it you're on whose
various
behalf
people.
are you speaking?
So P.K. Weil had passed away.
Okay. And when did he pass away, sir?
I want to say probably about 10 years ago.
Okay.
He was the professor emeritus at Stony Brook.
Professor Emeritus, what does
At
that
Stony
mean?
Brook, I believe that at the time he was retired, so he was involved in SOMAS, which is their School of Atmospheric Sciences.
Involved in what way, sir?
Actually, he produced the Long Island Planning Commission study in 1976, of which, and if you review that, he's one of the ones that makes delivers some primary concerns about the potential effects ensuing of lowering the groundwater table and affecting tidal range in the Great South Bay.
I guess my question is, because you say you yourself do not have academic credentials, but you're speaking on behalf of dead people who do have academic credentials.
Right.
What were his academic credentials?
All of them. I mean, I can tell you this.
Any, just even one.
Well, as I said, when he passed away, I know he was a professor emeritus at Stony Brook University.
Professor of what, though, sir?
Oceanography. Sorry.
He was an oceanographer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you're certain.
Marine sciences.
You're certain. Oh, was it marine science or oceanography?
Well, it depends. Here, hold on. If we're looking to vet all the sources,
I think we wanted too much detail here. We have
I guess I just.
another 50 speakers. I know where you're getting
I'm
at.
sorry. It's just the question is if we're going.
You've already made the record
just
clear.
one quick point that I'll just make is I only brought some sources with me. This is actually an artificial recharge study done by the U.S. Geological Survey and Nassau County Department of Public Works. It actually discusses the importance of recharge. It actually shows that in Medford and on Meadowbrook Parkway, they had actually established infiltration galleries and injection wells, and they said it's scalable and attainable.
Okay,
Yet,
I see those pages are a little bit yellowed. What's the date of that report?
1978.
Thank you. And are you aware, first of all, that the AI systems do in fact recharge back into the aquifer?
Into the ground.
Correct, thank you. And are you aware also that increasing numbers of STPs, certainly since 1978, do in fact recharge, maybe not entirely, but into the ground? Are you aware of that?
I'm aware that we have some groundwater recharge, but every year as you expand sewers, you eliminate on-site septic systems that contribute to that recharge.
I appreciate your observations. I wonder if there's any data that you yourself have observed that you can interpret that supports what you're claiming.
I would happily meet with you. I have all sorts of data.
Sir, is there any data that you've observed that supports what you're currently claiming here, other than what you heard from?
Well, actually, yeah, there's a number of them.
Sir, is there data?
Well, yes.
Yes, so Mr. Romaine, we just asked if you have any other information, if you can leave that with the clerk.
Okay.
Okay, you can forward that to us.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer.
Thank you. Legislator Krupski.
Oh, thank you. So I appreciate your appreciation for stormwater remediation, because besides protecting the aquifer by recharging that stormwater, we're also getting the benefit of not dumping the pathogens and nutrients and sediment into our surface waters. Are you aware of Suffolk County DPW's efforts for along the lines of drainage and stormwater control?
Well, I know on the east end, we have a greater amount of it because we have where your district is, we have a great amount of rural property, and there's actually a significantly greater amount of recharge that occurs there than, say, in town of Babylon, where I live. So yes, I'm aware that there's higher recharge efforts, but I've never seen a single plan that says, here's how we're going to limit the runoff. Just one quick example, the balance that we had in the 1950s, when development occurred back then, the requirement was that when the developer would purchase the property, they would then have to bring in an engineer. He'd have to determine what the size of the impermeable surfaces were, and then would have to build sumps or recharge basins so that runoff was prevented from going into our waterways. We've gotten away from that, and now everything seems to go to stream beds. So this is just an example of how in 1970 we had a healthy environment because there was the political will, not just the people like yourselves, but the citizens of Long Island that wished to retain their water table because they knew that this was their only source of drinking water.
Just one more question. Do you think that a plan that would protect the aquifer should include land preservation component to it?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
that's fine.
Because you get the benefit of recharge, plus you don't have to worry about wastewater treatment.
And if I could just give you a quick aside on that, it's a great example is if you think about it, where they talk about how they preserve the Pine Barrens and that saved water for everybody. Well, not for me because my water doesn't flow south from the Pine Barrens. My water flows south from, Dix Hills and things along those lines. So if you're not preserving all along the groundwater divide, you're really not helping everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer.
Thank you. Anybody else from Ms. Romaine? Yes, Legislator Bontempi.
Thank you for coming, Mr. Romaine. So if this resolution authorizing the sales tax and the funding were to be rewritten, how would you like to see it written?
Well, the main thing I'd want to see is launching programs that would limit runoff, provide recharge infrastructure that would increase the water table height. I'd monitor the groundwater base flow of streams so that this way their goal would be to ultimately return them to their historical flows, and also establish oversight and enforcement to ensure that the goals were met. And more importantly, on top of all that, I'd also recommend accessing federal funds as they're available for things such as water reclamation and protection of a sole source aquifer.
And then just one comment, thank you. I don't believe that one has to have academic credentials to be knowledgeable in a particular topic. You go to sources that have you find the expertise, and then you can share that expertise. So thank you for all the research you did on this topic, and I appreciate you coming in today. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Ms. Romaine? Thank you, Mr. Romaine.